Resume recording. There it is. I'm gonna click on the screen. Make my grand entrance. Okay, everybody. Good class today, and I think it's a little bit of a different class, and I think you'll enjoy it because it's a different way to think, different way to approach things, and I think it's a little bit different in how we usually go about confronting people that we perceive as that hate the Jewish people, that are against Israel, or whatever it is. Let's start with the introduction. I had a very long day. Let's have some class participation. Introduction, Larry. You're very shy. Let's get you involved.
Oh, me?
Yeah, you. Let's go read the final chapter.
Want me to read it aloud?
Yes.
Okay, the final chapter of outsmarting anti-Semitism addresses the question of responding to, approaching, and handling public figures who support policies or employ rhetoric that undermine Jews and their safety. The question is not new. It is as old as the Jewish nation itself. One among a myriad of examples is the issue that the issue was the 1970 French Mirage Saga. During the Arab War of Attrition against Israel, French President Georges Pompidou announced the sale of an entire fleet of Mirage jets to Libya, a sworn enemy of Israel, even as the French maintained an arms embargo against Israel. Then, as now, Jews had to consider what strategy would be best served as a countermeasure.
Okay.
Pepsi-Cola.
I'm sorry?
We should boycott Pepsi.
If you're going to boycott companies that are not friendly to Israel, you're going to boycott, quite a few companies. But the question is about boycotting or protesting. Is that always the proper way? So, as you know, I mean, if you live in the United States or you live in Europe, there are people in power, and I say power doesn't necessarily mean government. Power can mean media. There could be actors, it could be people in the news, in commerce, that take a stand. It can be many times misinformed or purposely misguided. So, for example, when we had the terrorist attack earlier this week in Jerusalem, where a guy was walking to the Kotel, not a soldier or anything, just a regular guy, and some Islamic scholar, quote unquote, came with a machine gun and shot, injured 4 people and killed this individual. If you looked at the headlines of the BBC, CNN, and others, it read 1 Palestinian and 4 others hurt in suspected terrorist shooting, or suspected shooting or something. Al Jazeera said one settler, 1 Palestinian killed in shooting. So the question is, when people are framing things against Jewish people, media or whatever it is, government, how are we supposed to go about it? How do we approach it? So, I mean, the examples can be various examples. So let's say something happens in the community, something happens somewhere that's clearly anti-Semitic, and the local government or that country's government is very slow or very lazy or very soft to respond. Many times when governments or people will respond to anti-Semitism, it's often a problem, in a different community. When it's in their own local community, then it's not so swift. Or you have somebody, let's say, who's pro-Israel, is going to speak on a college campus, and they're shouted down, and the people don't really do anything about it. The question is, how do we approach these people? How do we go about it to deal with people that we know have a negative view or a bad taste in their mouth of the Jewish people and or Israel? So let's go. This is an exercise for you on page 114, exercise 4.1. List famous living individuals who embrace opinions or have acted in ways that are harmful to Jews. Ira, it's you.
Who basically let somebody say that the Israelis are genocide, and your truth is important. It has to be.
Are you, Glenn, you speaking to everybody?
No, actually, I'm sorry. I just turned to my wife. I forgot we weren't on mute. But
Sounds wondering.
I don't know if it's time to give these names yet, so I'll just wait.
No, you can share a name here. Ira just walked in, so I'm going to share it. I'm going to put him on everyone can see that beautiful pun.
Well, the first person I thought of was our Vice President, Kamala Harris, who, when a Palestinian girl 2 or 3 weeks ago said something about Israel and genocide, she shook her head and she didn't disagree. And she said, it's important your truth comes out.
Right. My phone says something, Ira? Ira's telling me, I can't see the front of my phone. What does it say? This meeting is being recorded. Do we have to press OK or something? Or no? Got it. Okay. Right. I hope everything was said. So that's an example. So here, when someone accuses Israel of genocide, and then who's calling me? Oh, this guy. Oh shoot! I just sorry. That was a grandson. I did a funeral today, and the grandson was calling me. I'm sorry. Okay. So when someone accuses Israel of genocide, and then someone says, "Well, it's important that that in your opinion, your truth comes out." Well, that's a problem. So the question is, how do we go? What do we do about it? Okay, so let's take, in order not to get, hey, Michael J, how you doing? So in order, Michael J brought l'chaim. Oh yeah. Oh, I didn't realize I was on video. So in order not to get, because there are people in the show or watching online or might watch this later that are more that lean right, that lean left. So let's not use an example from recent times, okay? Because recent times, it's the wounds are still fresh. Let's take an example from a long time ago, which in the hindsight of history, we could all kind of judge it for what it is. All right. So I'm very behind in my slideshow. Guys, come on, you guys gotta tell me. Man. No, actually, I had to put new batteries in the clicker. Okay. So during the 1950s and 60s, Israel ordered and paid for, I think it was 50 Mirage airplanes from France. Okay, and that was great. It's interesting that we all consider America to be the biggest friend to Israel, but in the early days of Israel's statehood, America did not want to sell arms to Israel. Israel had to shop around for Europe for arms. So this was just before the outbreak of the 6-Day War. So they ordered it, and then when there was we had all the hostilities between Israel and their lovely neighbors, the ones that don't mow the grass and leave out their garbage and don't take down their holiday decorations until February. Those right? Cars don't work. They park in your grass. Those neighbors, right? Those are the problems that Israel has, right? Dog poops and right. That's the problem Israel has. So those neighbors, right? It got into a fight. Then, so Charles de Gaulle, the big tzaddik, who they named an airport after him, right? So but he started it, and then afterwards, So he placed an embargo against the sale of all military equipment to anyone who's fighting. So for the Syrians, the Egyptians, and everyone else, it wasn't a problem because they were getting supplied from Russia. But for the Israelis, it was a problem because they didn't have planes. But it got worse. In the 1970, during the War of Attrition, just to remind everybody, was the Arabs had this idea. They realized that the Israelis were very good at short battles. So they figured if they just keep bombing Sinai, Israel's going to tire out and they'll wear out, and they'll. So the president Georges Pompidou.
Pump and
One of the Pompa what?
Wasn't.
I think it's Pompidou. Maybe he's related to the guy from the Trump, Mike Pompeo. maybe, right? So, right. So he announced that France would sell the Mirage jets to Libya. Now, on one hand, France said we're not going to sell any arms to anyone involved in any hostilities. But then they go and they say we're going to sell planes. I think it was 110 planes. It was 110 planes to a sworn enemy of Israel. Look at text number 1. This is from I think it's an article by Henry Ginninger, right, from the New York Times. You know Mashiach's coming when in Chabad we're quoting the New York Times, right? After I remember growing up, my mother would always get the New York Times and she would curse and scream. Like, Ma, if you hate it so much, why do you get it? I'm like, I don't get it, you know. Like she would get it, not the curse. Those animals. Anyway, after much hesitation, well, I'm not going to read. I'm too tired. Glenn, you want to read?
Where do you want me to read, Reverend?
Text number 1.
Text number 1, Mirage jets to Libya?
Yeah.
Yes. After much hesitation, French officials acknowledged tonight that about 50 Mirage jet fighter planes would be sold to Libya. The confirmation of the sale was expected to provoke sharp protests from Israel. The Israelis suspect that the planes will sooner or later find their way to the fighting fronts. The French Defense Ministry reaffirmed the French embargo policy of selling no arms to the countries directly in conflict, Israel, the United Arab Republic, Jordan, and Syria, and said that they were convinced that Libya sought to supply her own forces. Israeli fears of the Libyan mirages is based on a conviction shared by some French experts that the Libyan Air Force in its present state could not absorb such numbers of highly advanced planes. The fear is compounded by the aggressive stance taken towards Israel by the new revolutionary military regime, which has been in power in Libya since early September. The plane sold to Libya is believed to be the Mirage 3, the same type as the 50 built for Israel, but placed under embargo in 1967. The Israelis are expected to find particularly galling the fact that they have been denied about the same number of planes now made available to a hostile Arab country.
So Glenn just finished reading. So now the question is like this: right after this happened, there was President Pompidou made a state visit to the United States. So imagine 1970, right? And you care about politics, or you care about it, or whatever it is, right? And you want to do something, and he's coming to the United States. What do you? Nixon was president. I am not a crook, right? Listen, all depends how you define the word. Crooked? I'm not crooked. I'm straight. So the question is, what do you think? This is the question, the exercise 4.2. What do you think the best strategy would be to deal with such a person? Do we protest? Do we throw tomatoes? You know, do we call a local senator? You know, what do you think?
Protest.
Or so Glenn says organized protest. Ira?
A demonstration, but I think also writing your senators and your congressmen.
Could you guys hear Ira? Because
Yes.
it's through you guys can't hear him. Because
Yes.
I'm using my earbuds to pick up the sound. So they hear you.
And here, Ira.
Larry says he hears Ira. All right. All right.
I say boycott.
So, boycott. By the way, talking about France. By the way, talking about France, there's no one better that had the best line about France, Jackie Mason. So he's talking about, he says, they think they're better than everyone. They think they're better than everyone, right? They're charging you $9 for a bottle of seltzer, right? The people from seltzer made a big mistake. If they would have called it seltzer, they could charge $9. Perrier, what is it? It's water and gas. I said, those Nazi bastards, anti-Semites. We had to bail them, and not out of one war, or two wars. And how do they repay us? While charging us $9 for a bottle of water again. right? That accuracy was great, right? Said I was in Paris. I saw all those parasites, right? I didn't take a shower. It's great. Anyway, so what do you think? Okay, so we have protests. We have right, your senator. What do you think? Maybe are things that should not be done. Anything say that's a bad strategy. This is important because we're going to talk about this.
I think attacking a person personally goes down very ill. You
So
have to take on the policies, not
so Glenn is saying to attack the policy and not the person.
right.
Well, we agree. Glenn, you should join more often. People agree. When I say stuff, people don't agree. It's like whatever, Rabbi. I mean, exactly. Yeah. Michael J just wants to give our bringing afterwards. Whatever. We'll just agree. Okay. So what does a Yid do? What does a Jew do when we want to know what the Jewish approach is? We look to the Torah. Keeping in mind that what we said many times, the Torah is not a storybook. The Torah is a template. So every experience that happens in life, whether the micro of your life or the macro of the Jewish people, can be found in the Torah. So when you have people that are not favorable to Israel or to the Jewish people, because usually they're synonymous. We spoke about this more last week. So how do we go about it? Okay. So we're actually reading last week's parsha. Well, this class would have been perfect for last week's parsha because it's really based on last week's parsha. Yaakov and his brother Esau don't get along. Surprise, right? Two brothers don't get along. It's interesting. The entire book of Genesis is all about brothers that don't get along. Cain kills Abel, right? You have Yishmael and Yitzchak, Jacob and Esau, Yosef and his brothers, which start this week. Until finally, the next book, the book of Exodus, Moshe and Aaron get along, and that's why we have redemption and everything. But what happens? So Jacob runs away. I mean, you can read the introduction, but I'm going to say it sort of outside. I'm gonna give the abridged version. Actually, you know something? No, I'm not. Michael J. Introduction. The Jacob's model. Read it. They could hear you. They can hear you. But thank God Apple made good microphones. Go. Jacob's model. Throughout history. The print too small?
No. Throughout history, Jews have had to carefully consider how to best deal with their enemies. Patriarch Jacob crafted a multi-pronged approach to the mortal hatred of Esau. You came closer. Nevertheless, his preference was to win him over, at least temporarily, via gift giving, warm words, and creating a favorable impression. He was successful. Esau dropped his plan of attack and ran to kiss him. This model was employed by Jews of each era. One Talmudic sage would read Jacob's story in the Torah before each meeting with Roman officers. Another sage who had insisted that Roman Jew hatred was irredeemable tried to win consensus from them nevertheless. So-called court Jews often engaged non-Jewish rulers and sought to sway them for the benefit of the Jewish community. Sometimes they were unsuccessful, as in the 1492 Spanish expulsion, while other cases met with resounding success, such as the 16th century saga of Yosef of Razi.
Right, Rashem is in Germany. Actually, that person, Yosef of Rashem, they, I think, if I remember correctly, they called him, because he came from Spain or went to Spain, they called him Spaniard. That's actually my mother's maiden name, Spaniard. So somehow I'm related to that guy. So, no, really, Really, my mother has a book. It says he was a hero. I'm just my name just happens to be the same. I know a guy, right? Okay, so let's go with the story. So, by the way, in the story of just before we continue, I just want to point out something on the screen. In the story of Pompidou, right? The Jews did come to protest, and it left a very bad taste. And you see there, right above the picture of the plane, Nixon offers his apology to Pompidou for heckling. Right? You see that? Okay. So we'll get back to that. It made it. Okay, let's get to the story of Jacob and Esau. So Jacob, if you remember, ran away because Esau wanted to kill him. He's away from home for 20 years. He doesn't know. He doesn't know. Is Esau still angry, or is he carrying a grudge? So he sends messengers to find out, and they come and say Esau's coming, and he's coming with 400 men, and they're not carrying flowers and cupcakes. All right. So Yaakov is very distressed, because he didn't want to be put into this situation. So he prepares himself in 3 ways. That is text number 2. Text number 1, he prays to God. Right. Lesson number 1, we emphasized that a Jew has to know that God controls the world, and all that we do is to create an avenue, a channel for God's blessing. So the first thing you got to do is you got to pray to the boss. Then you have to go about making a natural vessel, a natural conduit for God's blessing to find. But he had no idea what that was going to be. I'll try to appease Esau, who was a vile person, and hopefully, it'll work. Or Esau's going to come for war, and we got to be ready. So he split his family into 2, and he was in the front. And he said, if Esau comes, I'll fight, whatever it is. At least if one part of the family gets hurt, whatever, destroyed, at least the other family survived. So now, what was the gift? So the gift was, for today, if I brought you sheep and camels and goats, that wouldn't be much of a gift, right? Plus the HOA would probably come after you, right? Probably. Yeah, exactly. By the way, I found out there was a store down here that was selling kosher meat and not kosher meat under the same label. Just one didn't say kosher meat. Yeah, they got into big trouble. I think I don't know exactly where the store is. Not in Hollywood. I think South Miami Street. Anyway. So what did he do? So he gave Esau camels and goats and oxen and what else did he give? All these different things, and he split them up at different. Remember this when we read about in the Parsha? He split them up in different herds, and he told them spread it out. So when Esau looks, it looks like wow, it's coming over the horizon, more animals and more animals, and he told each one. This is for you, Esau, and your servant Yaakov is coming. And then when they finally met, Yaakov bowed down to him. He wasn't happy to have to go through it, but he wanted to try to avoid conflict. So, did it work? Well, we know text number 3. We know I ran ahead. What's going on over here? This is out of what? I'm sorry. I'll get to it in a second. Did it work? Text number 3. It says Esau ran to Yaakov, and he hugged him, and he fell on his neck, and he kissed him, and they cried. So it worked. It worked. Esau had a change of heart. Now, interestingly, by the way, the word "and he kissed him" in the Torah has dots. You see it on the screen? It's circled in red.
Yes.
Now, the tradition is it's in the Chumash and it's also in the Torah. Well, it's in the Chumash because it's in the Torah. So the tradition is whenever a word has dots, there are not that many on top. It means it's a double meaning. So now the question is, when Esau kissed Yaakov, was he kissing him out of whole heart, or it was an outward expression? Meaning he still harbored some resentment, but at this time, I gave him a big present, so he's like, mwah, mwah, the French kiss, right? So it's actually an argument, text number 4, which Michael J. referenced in the introduction to the section. So, and he kissed them, that's because Esau did not kiss Jacob wholeheartedly. That's according to one rabbi. Rabbi Shimon bar Yocha'i, he says, no, everybody knows that Esau hates Yaakov. Everybody knows. But at that moment, because of the whole gift, his compassion was aroused, and he kissed Yaakov with a whole heart. Now, let me ask you this: what about afterwards? Were Yaakov and Esau friends from now on? Were they all chummy, going fishing, drinking beer, brothers? They weren't friends. In fact, in 3 weeks, we're going to learn. Oh, do you know where Esau is buried? You guys know this midrash? No? I'm telling you. No. So,
The patriot.
the Esau is actually buried in 2 places. I'm getting. Are you guys getting the confused faces over there? Yeah. So what happened? Exactly. So what happened? What happened was that Esau sold the birthright, and he sold his plot in the cave of Machpelah, right? So in Machpelah, Adam and Chava buried there, Adam and Eve, Avram and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, and Yaakov buried Leah. Okay, Leah died way before Yaakov. When Yaakov died in Egypt, and his sons brought his body up to be buried in Israel, Jacob, we'll see in a few weeks, gave explicit instructions: please do not bury me in Egypt. So what happens is, when they come there, Esau's standing there. So what are you doing? So what do you mean, we're burying our father? He said, no. There are 2 plots, 2 boys. Yaakov used his plot for Leah. The other one's for me. So they said, what are you, stupid? You sold it. No, I didn't. Show me your document. Now there was a document, but it was back in Egypt. So they sent Naphtali. Naphtali's compared to a deer. Naphtali was very swift. He was very fast. Send them back to Egypt. Now, Dan had a son whose name was Chushim. Now Chushim was a mighty person, but he was handicapped. I think he was deaf. And yet he was sitting there, and he had no idea what's with the delay. So I guess they explained to him that Esau was holding it up. So it says that what my grandfather is going to wait in disgrace because this guy, he doesn't want to honor a thing. He had a stick and he went bam, and he just knocked his head clear off his body. The guy was a monster. He was a mighty man. Yaakov and his sons were blessed with incredible strength. So Esau's head rolled, and it rolled towards where Isaac is buried. Right, the rest of Esau's body is buried somewhere else. There's a whole, maybe after this, by the Farbrengen, we'll discuss the significance of that, right? Esau did not become friends with Yaakov. In fact, we learn that Esau had to move out of the land of Israel because there was too much property. But let me ask you a question. Do we care? What was happening in the story? Yaakov was on the threat of attack. So what did he do? He prepared for battle, but he sent a peace offering, right? Did it work? For the moment. But wait a second, after this, so let me ask you a general question. Is our mission as Jews to make every Gentile a lover of Jews?
No.
No. Do we care? I don't care. I mean, obviously we want people to like us and everything else. But I don't know, at least until Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, then everyone's going to get along, like in the words of Rodney King, right? But before that, I don't think it's realistic to expect that if they don't become a lover of the Jewish people, then there's no conversation. The lesson over here, and you see this is the question on page 120. What lesson does this episode provide for Jewish people in terms of dealing with their foes? So Yaakov did not need Esau to be transformed to or did he expect? Or that's not even what Yaakov needed. Yaakov's family and himself was under a threat, right, of attack. So the fact that Esau kissed Yaakov and he embraced him, and they were able to walk together in peace for a short while, that's a success. And this is the nakuda. This is the idea of tonight's class. The idea is that there's a way to go about dealing with people that don't like the Jewish people, and it's not always through not always. It's armed conflict or being loud and obnoxious. Usually doesn't work. Let's get okay. Let's go a little further. Like we said before, everyone knows the stories in the Torah. Oh, here we go. Right, this is the right. Everyone knows the stories in the Torah are there to guide us, right? So the story of Jacob and Esau is really a guide for how do as a Jew deal with somebody who is causing them problems. Okay, so you see on the screen, we can and should wield influence over the Esau's of our generation. That means our attitude isn't, they're going to be a hater, like what they say modern slang, the hater is going to hate. No, that's not our attitude. What we try to do is to be political, and we try to be diplomatic. So throughout Jewish history, there were always Jews who were petitioning people in power in order to secure better conditions for the Jewish people. See, for us, we live in the United States, and we have equal freedoms. But that's new. That's a brand new concept. Up until Jews came to the United States, Jewish life didn't have any worth. We were, right? So people can do what they wanted. So we see text number 5. The rabbi that you mentioned in the introduction, this is the rabbi here in text number 5. His name is Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai was a student of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the author of the Mishnah. And sometimes Rabbi Yehuda Nasi would send him out to go to Rome, to meet the government. Because many times they passed decrees. Like for one time they passed decrees, no one's allowed to keep Shabbos. Actually, tell you, the Midrash tells us the story behind the story. So why did Rebbe send Rabbi Yanai? First, Rebbe sent a different student. His name was Rabbi Reuven, because the Romans passed 3 laws. One is Jews can't work on Shabbos. And the other one is
no, they can't break the Shabbos.
I can't keep Shabbos. Can't keep Shabbos. Sorry. And what is this? Where is it? We're down here.
Can't do a bris.
No, wait. Right, they can't do a bris, and now right they can't. That's actually note number 6. So, that wasn't Rabbi Yanai. Shimon Bar Yochai. One second, I'll get back to it. I got confused. Anyway, so the point is that before the 2 stories are next to each other. Sometimes I confuse stories. All right, come with some slack, right? And before alcohol, exactly. Yeah. After the alcohol, it's all one story. It's not a different story. So your mistake is it's one story inside another story. No, it's all one story. So what happened is that Rabbi Yanai, before going in to meet the Roman governor, he would read this part of the Torah, and also while going out, to remember that this is the Torah's view. That when you have people that don't necessarily like you, you try diplomacy. You try to get them to be on the same page, or at least not to attack you. Interesting. The Midrash tells us that one time when Rabbi Yanai left, because in the story, Esau offers to escort Yaakov. And Yaakov said, no, it's okay. We'll be fine. Esau didn't want. Yaakov didn't want because he was afraid. What if Esau changes his mind? He said, no, I have small children. You go, you with your guys. I'll catch up. So so Rabbi Yanai learned from here that anytime because the Romans were very impressed when he came, he was very well spoken, we'll give you an escort. But no, I have my own escort. One time he didn't have his own escort, and he took them up on their offer, and he was robbed of all his money. It's interesting because the idea is, that he was supposed to follow the template of the Torah. So the point of the story, one of the points we're taking out over here is the way to deal with haters isn't to antagonize them and to mock them, or like Glenn said, to belittle them. The idea is we do it with diplomacy. Talk to them like you say, like a mensch. Listen, like I said before, Yaakov was very strong. Remember the story where all the shepherds were coming to take the water, and Yaakov picked up the rock all by himself? Shimon and Levi, two 13-year-old boys, wiped out an entire city by themselves. And then the Medrash tells us the other surrounding cities, and then Yehuda was a person of literally superhuman strength. And when Yosef captures Binyamin, Yehuda goes to Yosef and says, listen, obviously you don't know who we are. Maybe you don't watch the news, but I'm telling you right now, if you don't let the brother go, it's going to be very bad news, not just for the city. We're going to destroy the country. We're talking about 10 guys, 11 guys it was 10. They were people of tremendous strength. And Yosef said, listen, you're not the only one they had no idea who he was. Relax. I'm not afraid of you. But the point is that now a lot of people think that because, for example, Israel has a strong military, or Jews are in a position of power, or now we have Twitter, or we have a voice, we should always, scream and out-scream them and everything else. And maybe the point of the story is maybe that's not such a good idea to antagonize them. Maybe there's, and again, we're not talking about people who we'll call them independents, or people that don't really have an opinion on Jews. Either way, we're talking about people that have a negative opinion of Jews, a negative opinion of Israel. Even these people, we should try to employ conversation and diplomacy, and maybe even give them gifts. But there's nothing wrong with that. You see, you work with Esau, and even Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. This was even Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was a person who suffered at the hands of the Romans. There's a story that these three rabbis were talking about all the infrastructure the Romans put in to Israel, roads and bridges and all that. So one rabbi said, "Oh, the Romans are great." Shimon Bar Yochai said, "They only care about themselves." And another rabbi was silent, and someone told the Roman governor about the conversation, and they hunted Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He had to hide in the cave for 13 years until the person who made the decree who signed his death warrant died, and that was abolished. But yet, even though he's the one who said that Esau hates Yaakov, and Esau is synonymous with Rome, why that is, if you want to know why that is, we can talk about it afterwards. I mean, Esau is synonymous with Rome when there was a decree. See, text number 6, that you can't observe Shabbos, circumcision, and finally family purity. They had a decree that women are not allowed to go to the mikveh. And he went to Rome. So the story I was telling you before, Rabbi Shimon went to Rome. They sent the guy Rabbi Reuven, and he disguised himself as a Roman official, and he convinced himself. He said, "No, let them keep Shabbos. They're going to be poorer. It benefits you. The Jews keep Shabbos, and let them do bris milah, because if they do bris milah, then they'll be weaker, right? Because they're mutilating themselves. And if the woman don't go to the mikveh, or actually it wasn't they can't go to the mikveh. The law was that a man must cohabit with his wife when during her period. Said, but it says, if otherwise you can do that, then they're not going to be able to have children. Don't. So the Romans, oh, you're right. Let's get the Jews. But then they found that their Reuven was Jewish, so they reinstated all the decrees. So Shimon went, and they said, who should go? Shimon Bar Yochai, because he's experienced the miracles. I mean, things happen. And he went to Rome, and he spoke to the emperor, a guy who he knew he hated the guy. Shimon hated the guy, and he knew the emperor hated him. Yet he spoke to him, and he made a very good impression on him. And the decree was abolished. So you might think, if the guy hates me anyway, if Esav hates, why bother? Why would Rav Shimon going to go? Because just because you don't like me doesn't mean I can't get what I need from you. Right? Like, you have a store. You have to love every customer? No. Like I said, there are some people, like Shimon Yocha'i said, that they're not going to like the Jews. That's okay. No, not okay. I mean, that's the reality. But he travels to Rome. Why? Because right now the Jewish people are in a state of trouble. And you should know, at that time, the Jewish people had an army. This was right around the time, or right before, right after, of the Bar Kokhba revolt. And it was not, we think, it's interesting, for those who haven't studied history, you think of the Jewish people as, weak and lambs led to slaughter, not standing up for themselves, because the truth is that's really what the Jews were for all the Middle Ages, But that's not the way the Jews were, really. There's not one country that cost the Romans more blood and more treasure than the Jews. Do you know that after the story of Hanukkah, the Romans were afraid to attack the land of Israel? They controlled the whole Europe, the whole Middle East, all the way into Africa. One country they didn't touch. They were afraid to enter Israel. You know how they got into Israel? We invited them in because we were fighting amongst ourselves. So yeah, we brought in a superpower to resolve our issues. And that was the beginning of the end. So, yeah, the Romans did not like the Jewish people, but the Jewish people are the state where there's the terrible decree against the Jewish community. So we have two options. We can go and fight them and everything else, or we can try diplomacy. Now, anyone ever heard the concept or title of court Jew? You heard that before?
Yes.
Yay, nay?
Yeah.
Not token Jew. Token Jew is something else. Glenn, you say you have.
Yes.
Okay. So in Europe, the court Jew was it says in Europe, there was a guy who, and you see over here, figure 4.1, all the different people that were core Jews. There were people who were kind of ambassadors for the Jewish people. Whenever there was a decree, and many times there were decrees, because you had these ministers, whatever it is, that would go convince the king that the Jews were this, the Jews were that, and you needed somebody who can go and advocate for the Jewish people, and they were called core Jews, or actually in Hebrew they were called shtadlonim, or right, shtadlanim, it's the person who put forth the effort. One of the most famous ones you see over here was Yosef of Russia, and he writes text number 7, a core Jew, page 124, and he said, Ira, you want to read? I'm going to get myself a cup of water. Go ahead, text number 7.
In 1554, announcers once again heralded Emperor Charles, while he was in Belgium and Holland, lands uninhabited by Jews. To oppose the accusers with the help of Hashem, I was at the court of the exalted emperor for 4 months, from the 1st of Adar till the 1st of Sivan, pursuing the interests of the Jewish community. Although Rothroyd attempted to swallow me alive.
We don't know who this Rothroyd is. In his notes, the Yossel Roshem doesn't mention who he is. but apparently he's the antagonist. He's the guy who's trying to cause him harm. Yeah.
So attempted to swallow me alive and to bring about my demise. Hashem, in his great mercy, sent his messenger and saved me from his hands and from all those who sought to harm me. At that time, I had an audience with the emperor in his private chamber. I spoke to him for as long as I needed, and he responded sympathetically. During this period, when I had free time, I was secluded in my room. I authored a book entitled The
Sanctified Path.
Sanctified Path.
Now, this book, we don't have it. It's been destroyed, lost. It's interesting. This book is quoted by other rabbis at the time, so they got that book, but we don't have it. But we see over here this Yossel Rosh. Now, by the way, just to give you a little bit of context, this Charles V. Let me see. In the court of Maximilian. He advocated in the court of Maximilian I and Charles V. These people were not Jew lovers. This Charles V was a grandson of King Ferdinand, I think through his mother, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, the same king and queen who expelled the Jews from Spain. So we're not talking about people over here who were great fans of the Jews. Yet, in order to protect the Jews from oppression and expulsion in Germany, he tried diplomacy. An old joke that one day the Pope decreed that all Jews had to leave, or either leave or leave Italy or convert. So they went to him and said, "Come on," and everything else. They tried to talk him out of it. They said, "All right, I have a debate. If I win the debate, Jews can stay. If I win, Jews have to leave. If the rabbi wins the debate, Jews have to leave. Jews can stay. Sorry." So the problem is the Pope didn't speak Yiddish, and no rabbi spoke Italian. So they decided they're going to do sign language. So they sit down, and the Pope picks up 3 fingers. The rabbi picks up 1 finger, and the Pope wags his finger all around. The rabbi points his finger over here. Then the Pope takes out a wafer and wine. The rabbi takes out an apple. The Pope gets up and says, "He won. He's a genius." That's the Pope. What happened? He says, "I picked up 3 fingers, the Trinity." And he says, "There's still one God." Told the rabbi one God. And then I said, "God's all around us." And the rabbi said, "No, God's right here." And I took out the wafer and the thing for the blood, the body, whatever it is. And he took out apple for original sin. The guy is unbelievable. So they asked the rabbi, "What happened?" So he said, I have no idea. First he told me you had 3 days to leave. And I said, "Let me tell you, we ain't going any." He says, "We're not going anywhere." Then he said, "You can move anywhere you want in Europe." I said, "We're staying right here." So he took out his lunch, so I took out mine. So there you go, right? So there's always been times where that the Jews have been in trouble, and we've petitioned, the Gentiles in power. Just Yossel of Rosheim, he wasn't going to bestow a righteous Gentile. In Israel, there's concept of righteous Gentile. A lot of people who protect the Jews during the Holocaust. If you go, there's like Avenue of Righteous Gentile. They're actually streets named after them. If you go to Yad Vashem in Israel, when's the last time you were in Israel? You said a long time ago, right? So Yad Vashem was there. So in Yad Vashem, in the Holocaust Memorial, there's a whole row of righteous Gentiles, right? It's not like Yosef of Rosheim was trying to go and create Charles into this lover of the Jewish people to change him. That was not the goal. The goal was to protect the Jewish people. The Jewish people were in a state of harm or in a state of danger, and he was trying to protect them. So you try diplomacy. Now, does diplomacy always work? No, diplomacy doesn't always work. this painting is hanging in Spain, 1889. What? Hanging in Madrid. Yeah, Museo de Prada. Yeah, thank you. I thought it said Prada. I'm like, okay, excuse me, Ira Prada. Right? In the Gucci Museum. So, and this painting is, it's supposed to be the Barbanel was a very wealthy and affluent Jew who lived in Spain in the 1400s. You should know, by the way, that the decree to expel the Jewish people was really signed in 1391. You know, it was really signed in 1391. A rabbi, the Bar Tanura, Avad Bar Tanura, got it pushed off 100 years, 1491. The Barbanel got it pushed off another year to 1492. And according to the legend is, again, this is the legend, that he offered him a tremendous amount of gold. And he almost won over. A legend is that King Ferdinand didn't hate the Jews as much as his wife. His wife Isabella was much more of an ardent, Roman Catholic and displeased with the Jews in Spain. And the legend is that they almost won over them to abolish the decree. And Torquemada was the head of the Inquisition, and he busted in. He said, for Judas sold him for 30 pieces of silver. Are you going to sell him again? And that aroused their religious fervor, and that was gone. Doesn't mean that diplomacy works every single time. But the idea we see from Yaakov didn't just prepare diplomacy; he also prepared for war. But we have to try. The idea is we have to try. Even people that right now have a negative opinion of Jews in Israel, whatever it is, we could try to appeal to them. And you never know. By the way, many of these people never met a Jew. I was once listening to a history class. It says anti-Semitism made its way, Eastern Europe, Poland, and Russia, even before Jews. They hated the Jews even before they met a Jew. Right? So, because deicide, I'll tell you a story. I don't know, some of you guys might know him, Danny Werba. He comes once in a while, yeah. So Jackie's son, right? So he travels for business. He traveled to South America. I think the story happened in Cuba. I forgot where it is. So a guy comes over to him and asked him, what are you? He says, I'm Jewish. You killed God. And he says, yes, me, I did it, yes, me. So the guy never met a Jew in his life. So sometimes people have this negative opinion. Maybe they had a negative experience. But the point is, he tried. Now, you might say, 1 second, Rob. Here, the Jewish people are the chosen people. Why are we going to go and beg? Why are we going to belittle themselves to try diplomacy? So again, go back to remember the story of Yaakov. Yaakov wasn't begging Esau. Yaakov was, first thing he did was he prayed to God. He knew that security of the Jewish people ultimately lies in God's hands. Now the story of Hanukkah is happening. We know that if God wants you to survive, you survive. Not. But we have to create a venue for God to protect us. So now the protection doesn't always have to be an aggression, an antagonism. The protection could sometimes be through diplomacy, and that's the idea. I skipped the slide. Here you go. So we're saying the answer is that recognizing that God's hand doesn't make you feel inferior. All right. Any questions before we go on? Yay, nay? No questions. Okay. Signs of hate. I guess my turn to read. I didn't read it. As documented above, it has been assumed throughout Jewish history from an ancient patriarch Jacob, and at least until early modern period, the harm to Jews could be deflected by appealing to the sentiments of those who hated them. However, this approach may seem illogical. How can anyone expect to gain something from appealing to an anti-Semite? Someone hates you. How can you get something from them? An explanation appears to have provided by modern neuroscientific research. In his book, Incognito, The Secret Lives of the Brain, David Eagleman analyzes the case of the actor Mel Gibson. Remember that story? Mel Gibson was pulled over drunk driving in 2006, then asked the cop if he was Jewish. And the cop said yes. And he said all the problems in the world are Jews and all that. And he said, proclaiming the Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world. After, when Gibson sobered up, he apologized, saying there is no excuse, nor should there be, for any tolerance for anyone who thinks or expresses any kind of anti-Semitic remarks. So you don't.
No.
Why? Because of this incident.
Mhm.
Someone once pointed out to me, just since we're on the subject of Mel Gibson, the Romans were infamous for their gore, right? The gladiators, and all that. So, right. So someone told me if you watch Mel Gibson movies, they're all very gory and bloody and people body breaking. After this incident, he says Mel Gibson's a Roman. Comes from that. That's their mindset. It was interesting, and that person. So we have over here, right? We made a claim, very interesting claim, that we assume, or we put a strong investment in the fact that we can get good things out of people that aren't necessarily the greatest hate. But if they're haters, where does the hate go? So it's interesting. In the first couple classes, we spoke about the story of Purim. You realize that Haman and Mordechai and Esther don't try to petition Haman. You realize it? Not straight to the top, but Haman was the one who had the power. He had the ring. So, but they go to Achashverosh. In the story of Purim, does Achashverosh turn into a lover of the Jewish people? No. In fact,
Just like the poor Jew that we read about here that went to the emperor of Belgium. He went straight to the guy. He didn't go to his vice president or whatever that is.
right, but no, but in this point, Haman was the one who had the power to make decrees. He had the signet ring, and if Haman would have taken it away, he could have. So it's interesting that although the Jews make their way back to Israel, Mordechai stays in Persia. Why? Because he understands that Achashverosh is not a lover of the Jews, and there has to be someone to advocate that point over there. In fact, the Megillah ends off that Mordechai was appreciated by most of his brethren. Some of the rabbis didn't like the fact that he stayed in power in Persia. They thought he should come back to Israel. But Mordechai felt that another Haman's going to come, and tomorrow Achashverosh can decide to destroy the Jewish people again, right? So, yeah, that's exactly what he was. He was the prime minister, but not because he was thirsty for power, because he didn't trust He didn't trust Achashverosh. So if the person hates them, why would he do you any favors? The guy hates Jews. Why would he do you any favors? So modern neuroscience may have the answer, right? So we have the story, and I told you the story of Mel Gibson. So some people think that the story of Mel Gibson shows that really he was an anti-Semite the whole time, but he couldn't say it because in Hollywood, you say something like that, you won't get roles. But with the alcohol, it came out. Others say no, and actually Gibson has a friend, I think it was Dean Devlin, who said, no, I know the guy, he's not anti-Semite. He's just, he drank too much, and things just came out that it nothing to do with himself. Text number 8 is very interesting. Text number 8A and 8B, and it's a little bit long. I'm just going to summarize what it says. This is text page 128, and he says that your brain can have within it. What is it? Your brain only has one expression. Okay, you're either expressing kindness or hatred, whatever it is. So just because you have a bad feeling of somebody doesn't mean you always have to express bad to this person. And to say, there's an ongoing conversation between the different functions of the brain, each competing to control a single output. So when you have chocolate cake, I have chocolate cookies for bringing afterwards. On one hand, he's like, you want the cookies. Other hand, you say, well, the cookies aren't good for me. So that's kind of what the Alter Rebbe, today's the 19th day of Kislev, the biggest Yom Tov in Chabad calendar. The Alter Rebbe went out of prison, and a year later, the Tanya was printed. So Alter Rebbe says over here that we only have one body, and inside we have this war going on. And he wrote it in different words in 1790s, and you have a war between the divine soul, and he calls it the animalistic soul. The animalistic soul just wants to satisfy its impulses. The divine soul wants to do things that are constructive. Now, the problem is they only have one method of expression. So just because you indulge yourself in chocolate cake, does that make you into an entirely indulgent person? No, at that moment, you're indulgent. And just because you put on tefillin, does that mean that you're an entirely holy person? No, for that moment, you're holy. And life, every single moment, every single day, is a constant battle between these two forces. So what he's saying in similar terms, I have no idea if you read Tanya or not, is kind of same thing. We often like to categorize a person, right? This person is like this, and the person doesn't have any differences. So can Esau, although he was a bad guy, does that mean Esau was incapable of showing compassion? Do you think you can't show compassion to people that, or think? I mean, I hope you don't hate anyone like Esau does, right? So, look at the end of 8a. As a French essayist, Michael de Montaigne, whatever, put it, there's much difference between there is as much difference between us and ourselves as there is between us and others. That means we are complex being. Inside of us, we can be feeling this, but we can also, express something else. And just go back to Mel Gibson. We have seen the behavior as an outcome of a battle among internal systems. To be clear, so I'm not defending, right? Alcohol is now a truth assertive. Instead, it tends to tip the battle towards the short term, unreflective action, a faction which has no more less nor less claim than any faction other than the true one. Here we go. So going back, right? Mel Gibson, hate there with Esau. Is hate there? Yes. But there are many different things that are going on. I mean, you can contradict yourself. We do it all the time. Right? You're feeling one way, and all of a sudden something happens, and you say something else. Put it this way. Let me ask you another. Let's frame the question another way. Let's say you have a politician, a person in government, right, who says he's a friend of Israel. Does that mean he's forever going to be a friend of Israel? What if something happens and he changes his mind? No, right? So let me show you a video. Can you guys see the new screen? Yes, no?
No.
Do you see a picture of the rabbi in your screen? You guys have a black screen. Okay, well, let me
All
share.
I see is a blank screen.
Okay, hold on. New share. And this one. There you go. Okay. I'm gonna mute myself. Hopefully the sound participates, not like last week.
Attention to the individuals or organizations leading those efforts, rather than affecting any real change. A note I'd like to share. In this whole piece, we're only referring to a certain type of anti-Semitism. For example, the Rebbe had a very vocal and robust approach to Israel and how it must defend thoroughly that her enemies are afraid to attack. Now, these issues are for a different program. The next anecdote I'd like to share is about a letter written to the Rebbe by Professor Alan Dershowitz.
When I was involved in politics and civil rights and human rights, the enemy of civil rights and civil liberties was Jesse Helms, the United States Senator from North Carolina. He stood against everything that I stood for, and many of my friends and colleagues stood for, and so I was a little surprised, disappointed, when Jesse Helms was honored by the Rebbe in Chabad. And so I wrote a very polite letter to the Rebbe, who I had met previously a number of times, respectfully wondering why they chose to honor a man who was against integration, was against gay rights, women's rights, equality for all. And the Rebbe wrote back a very poignant, very powerful letter saying, we honor not only to recognize the past, but to influence the future, and watch carefully to see whether or not we have had an influence on the conduct of Jesse Helms.
The Rebbe actually wrote a 3.5-page letter explaining to Professor Dershowitz that, first of all, Senator Helms was not an honoree, but he came to an event at the Capitol, along with other senators and congressmen, in order to pay tribute to a Jew and a Jewish movement. The Rebbe writes that he's long been concerned about the state of our nation's public schools and the American family and society, and the event was geared to upgrading the ethical and moral foundations of education.
The video stopped.
So I'm back. Hopefully it worked. It worked well this time. Okay, you guys can see the screen. I think it's coming up. So they can see the screen there.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the story. So in this story with Jesse Helms, and also we'll get back to the Pompadour, right? Here was a guy that was anti-Israel. And what was, let's say, compare it to Esau, right? Was Yaakov trying to transform Esau and make every cell in, take out all the, take out all the hate from him? That's not what he's trying to do. He's trying to secure a good position for Jewish people and for the Jewish homeland. So here you have Jesse Helms, right? Jesse Helms was a guy who was anti-Israel, and Chabad invited him to an event. Dershowitz says in honor. It wasn't honor. And so Dershowitz writes this letter to the Rebbe, and when Dershowitz speaks in another place, he wrote to the Rebbe quite strongly, how could Chabad invite him? This guy is anti-Israel. And the Rebbe said, listen, you never know. You never know. Maybe today is anti-Israel, but through, interaction and through conversation and through diplomacy, maybe it won't be anti-Israel, and maybe even it'll be a pro-Israel. But to go and demonstrate against the guy and scream at the guy, you're this, you're that, the Rebbe wasn't a fan of that, and that's exactly what happened with Pompadour. They heckled him and they demonstrated him, and the truth of the matter is, what people didn't know is that France started selling arms quietly to Israel, and then when they made the whole big public charade and everything else, they got upset and they stopped, and it was only later they started selling again. And you see in text number 9 that Nixon went to New York. I said, this is from the New York Times, to apologize to President Pompadour, who was angered by the terms of insults to him and his wife during pro-Israel. And actually, I was speaking to a Chabad colleague, and the guy in his class was from Chicago, and he said, yeah, I was bad at protest. So listen, the difference is, in when the Jews were in Christian Europe and under Muslim countries, the only avenue we had was diplomacy. We couldn't go to war. Yaakov prepared for both. Now we can. But the question is, should we? Just because Israel has the might, or in the United States, a lot of Jews are in a position of say, media influence, or you can post on social media, and you can debase or say or
boycott these people or shame them, is that the way to go? So if you look at text 10a, the Rebbe seems to take a at least in the initial approach thing here. That what you should do is you should first try. I think in the Rebbe's words or other words, it's quiet diplomacy. Try to engage in conversation. And he said, and the Rebbe says, the public protest against the president of France has blocked any lobbying effort that French Jews might have. And stop any French assistance to Arab countries. The stated reason for these protests was to demonstrate that America is a democratic country and American Jews are not cowardly. It's a worthwhile objective. People should know that you can't push Jews over. But however, when Jews' lives are not at risk, that's a good time to show that you're not a coward. But when you have France selling arms to Arab countries, you put your pride away. So you can organize public protests, or you can make efforts to prevent or postpone the sale, or lessen, or maybe they shouldn't sell them as good equipment. The proof of these agreements, the agreement of this nature, have been reached in the past, and that's what the Rebbe's push was. The Rebbe also spoke about Soviet protests. The Rebbe was against the protests, and the Rebbe said that's not going to work with these guys. With the Russians, you gotta talk. You gotta sit down on a table, and they're not going to be bullied into. I think we see it in modern day times too. Russians are not going to be bullied. You have to talk to them. You see text number 10b. Quiet diplomacy works. When Mr. Pompidou visited the United States, there were mass protests against him. This we're saying, and an effort backfired. Can now be said that despite the French embargo against selling arms, the French president had allowed small arms and light weapons to Israel. Because of the demonstrations, approval for such sale were withdrawn. At such time, when no longer being disparaged, he resumed dealing with the Jews behind closed doors. He also arranged 300 Jews to leave Egypt. Again, this is the 70s, and there's still some Jews left there. And all this was done without publicity. The last sentence of the first paragraph. The Jewish media was warned against disclosing any of this. We only know of this from the non-Jewish press. Here, the last paragraph is very powerful. The conclusion we must draw from this case is that we do not influence anti-Semites by calling them, you're an anti-Semite, you're a thief, you're a murderer. Even though they're anti-Semites, and even though they're bad people, but engage them in diplomatic conversation. Although such individuals are well aware of what we think about them, they know we don't like them. Nevertheless, human beings, and wish to behave like human beings. So now what happened? Helms turned into Israel supporter. And I think there was another story with a big preacher or something. Farwell.
Jerry Farwell.
Right? I think it was a guy. And he was originally anti-Israel, but then the Israelis gave him a plane and they gave him a gift, and all of a sudden he turned into the point of the matter is just because someone took an anti-Jewish stance or maybe harbored anti-Jewish feeling, it doesn't mean we can't work with this person. It doesn't mean we can't get that person to take another another approach. Right? So we said Mr. Helms. And then in 1984, they had Education Day in the Rebbe's birthday. President Reagan signed, everyone else signed. This concept to uplift the teachings of moral and ethics in public schools. It's not just about math and science and facts. And so the first time this Jesse Helms came was at this signing. It was a big deal, this Chabad dinner. And that's where Dershowitz went crazy. The text number 11 is the Rebbe's response to Alan Dershowitz on page 136. And he says like this: I trust you will agree that in regard to persons of influence, whether in Washington or elsewhere, the first objective should be to persuade and encourage such a person to use his influence in a positive way in behalf of any and all good causes, which are important to us. We should welcome every public appearance which lends public support to the cause, especially when there's a likelihood that it may be the forerunner of similar pronouncements in the future. The Rebbe says, my experience with such people, though I never met the said person, Jesse Helms, has convinced me that politicians are generally motivated more by expediency than by conviction. In other words, the public pronouncement on various issues does not stem from categorical principles or religious imperatives. Hence, most of them, if not all, are subject to change in their positions depending on time, place, and other factors. I believe the Rebbe continues, therefore, that the proper approach to such persons by Jewish leaders should not be rigid. I think that's the underlying word here. Don't be rigid. Look at the story of Yaakov. Prepare for one or the other. As a rule, it does no good to engage in a Cold War, which later leads to our war, nor does it serve any useful purpose to brand one an enemy or an anti-Semite. However tempting it is to do so, even if that person vehemently denies it, it can only be counterproductive. So again, we're not talking about Hammans over here or straight out of the Semites. We're talking about leaders. Oh, by the way, this Charles V officially didn't hate the Jews. The Romans didn't hate the Jews. They come out and say they hated the Jews. Hitler's a guy, you know.
And that's the one example where appeasement didn't work.
Right. No, like we said, it's not appeasement. It's not appeasement. It's diplomacy.
Well,
Also,
appeasement.
Well, Europe did.
Yeah.
No, we're talking about what the Jewish people.
Well, that's what the British called diplomacy. It's appeasement.
Peace in our times.
Yeah.
Right, but that's that's wrong. So, for example, just to take the example, in Jewish law, if some anti-Semite comes and says, "Listen here, we'll if you don't give us 5 Jews to kill, we're going to kill 100," or what? Even if it's 1 Jew, you don't do that. That's appeasement. You can't do that. We're talking about over here somebody who power and influence and it's having a negative impact on Jewish communities. So, do we engage with these people? The answer is yeah. We try. And we try to get them to change. And indeed, with President Carter, his predecessors, going back to President Roosevelt, regardless of their sometimes openly negative feeling towards Jews and Jewish culture. So, it said, you see there on the screen, Jesse Helm became he changed his stance. He changed his stance on Israel. So it's important. So the important lesson over here is like this: if you believe that everyone could be of assistance, that nobody, that just because a guy comes out as anti-Jew, anti-Israel, if this person is in a position of power and influence, then they could be of assistance. So number one, just because they hate, they still can help. Again, we're trying to protect, you're right, when Mashiach comes, the world will be healed of hate and there'll be no more animosity and all that. That's true. Right now, we're talking about diaspora times, where there are people that hate each other. This is not, by the way, a Jew-Gentile thing. People hate each other for no reason, right? Race, creed, color, religion. People like to categorize other people and hate them. I mean, I'm going to show you another video now. This is with Shirley Chisholm. You ever heard the name before? Shirley Chisholm? Shirley Chisholm was a congresswoman. Congresswoman. She was the first, I think, Black congresswoman. I think she was from New York. It was from Brooklyn, actually. Yeah. And she came in there, calling everything else. Watch the story, talking about how people, different people could work together. I think I figured out the problem is my AirPods. So when it comes time to play the video, whoops. Oh no, sorry guys. Here's Larry. I'm gonna play the video. I shut the. I'm gonna play the video and I'm going to take off my AirPods. Take them off. One. Take them off. Two. Mute the phone here. Sorry.
Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan.
My two best stories about the Rebbe in public policy, and I use them in class. I actually used them. I used the first one I used in class in American politics as an example. There was a woman in Brooklyn, college teacher, angry black woman named Shirley Chisholm. She got elected to the United States Congress in the mid-'60s. She was a fiery speaker. She was considered a black power advocate. Whites were scared silly of her. And she was the first black woman ever elected to the United States Congress, and she was a bomb thrower. So the white Southern racists that ran the U.S. House of Representatives from the South said, we'll teach this blank a lesson. And they assigned her to the Agricultural Committee of the House of Representatives. It was a great gelächter, it was a great joke. I still remember the New York Times front page article said, does a tree grow in Brooklyn, question mark. It said, the chairman appointed Shirley Chisholm not to the House, which requested, not to the Committee on Poverty, but the Agriculture Committee. And when she retired from the House, I was there when she told the following story. She said she was very depressed, very upset, and didn't know what to do. She got a phone call. The Lubavitcher rabbi wants to see you. And of course, she was the congresswoman from Crown Heights. She had helped win the election, the primary, with the strong support of Lubavitch. She had some very close relationship with people in the Crown Heights community, and she came to see the Rebbe. She told the story. She had seen him once before when he had refused to endorse her. But they said, everyone voted for me, so I guess he did something. She was very cute about that. She said, but then she came to see him the second time, and he sat down and he said, I know you're very upset. She says, I am upset. I'm insulted. What should I do? And he said, what a blessing God's given you. This country has so much surplus food, and there's so many hungry people, and you can use this gift that God's given you to feed hungry people. Find a creative way to do it. And she says the first day she came to Washington, she met a young congressman who's now a world-famous figure, Robert Dole from Kansas. And they started talking, and he said, you know, our farmers have all this extra food. We don't know what to do with it. She said, 1 second, the rabbi. And what we call WIC and food stamps largely expanded. It was a tiny pilot program before the whole existing food stamps program came out of the Agriculture Committee of the United States Congress. And Shirley Chisholm said in front of everyone there in Washington, she said, I owe this because a rabbi who was an optimist taught me optimism, taught me that what God gives, what you may think is a challenge, is a gift from God. She said, if poor children, babies, I heard her say this, she said, poor babies have milk, if poor children have food, it's because this rabbi in Crown Heights had vision.
Let me reshare the other screen, which are why it's in there. I think we're up to that one. Yeah. Slideshow. Hold on, guys. I'm sorry. Bang. And then new share. Then this one. Are we back there? Yes. Yep. We are. So this is the idea. So this is the idea. We have a person, right, who seems like we have nothing in common. Bob Dole, tall white guy from Kansas. Shirley Chisholm, short black woman from Brooklyn. Democrat, right? But I don't know. I'm not a historical political guy. I can imagine that they probably didn't agree on much. Maybe they even argued on more things than they agreed on. But they were able to work together to do something. Okay, so where did that leave us? You guys can hear me, right? Just making sure. Yeah. I run. What's called? Say they can hear me fine.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. All right. So let's. I'm behind. Okay. So first of all, I think one of the until we get to the Mashiach times, where, like I said, Jews and Gentiles will realize that we're really a team, and it's not one team against the other team. It's really one team to recognize what God's mission in the world. So we can learn from what Yaakov did to manage the situation. Yaakov didn't love Esau. In fact,
it says like he was a little annoyed, not a little, he was very annoyed and sad. They had to go through this whole. Here was Jacob. He was a perfectly wholesome, holy person, and he has to put up with this murderer, rapist, terrible guy. But you know something? That's the Golos. So he could have went to Esau and said, "You bloody," you know what I'm saying? He didn't. So like Glenn said earlier in the class, calling people names, that's not going to, that's not going to help. The shaming a person, that's not going to help you. That's not going to help. Now, you do have to be able to defend yourself. And sometimes diplomacy doesn't work. But the first thing you got to do is you try diplomacy. And the Rebbe was a fan of quiet diplomacy. Behind closed doors. I'll tell you an interesting medrash. The Gemara quotes it. Says that the first tablets were given with pomp and circumstance and lights and sound and thunder and lightning, and they were smashed. The second tablets were given very quietly, and they remained forever. And the lesson is that God loves, modesty and quiet. A lot of things get done, when the TV cameras are away. When people aren't acting for the camera, whatever it is, you don't have to worry about the constituents. You can get, you can get things done. So yes, you try the gifts before the war, and then you get ready for everything. Like I said, this is a message for, it's not just for us, but for Jewish people. This is a message for humanity, because the Torah is a book for humanity. The Torah is a book that Jewish people are supposed to teach everyone in the entire world. So let's not rush let's not rush to judge people. There are people who might have different experiences, might feel this, might feel that. You never know. You engage them and might be able to work together. And maybe something. Listen, I work for myself in the office. Michael J works in a real office. Glenn, I don't know. Glenn officially goes to work to Virginia. Right, I don't know. Right, officially, yeah, exactly. I think Glenn works for the Mossad. I can tell you. Right, exactly. Bless you. He's in between Quantico, right, or Langley. What Quantico is, and Langley is the CIA. I remember there was a guy, an Israeli guy I knew. Unfortunately, he was killed in Lebanon in 2006, and he worked for Israeli security. I said, "So what do you do?" He said, "I can't tell you. All I can tell you is that if you move in Ben Gurion Airport, I know." All right. Enough said. Yeah. He was a Martian, right? So the idea is all these different people are crossing your life, right? And some people you're gonna have positive experiences with, and some people you can have negative experiences with. And not everybody is gonna be all chummy. That's not the way real life is until Mashiach comes. But it doesn't mean just because you have a coworker who's, let's say, let's use modern day, one you're a Democrat and is a Republican, or you're a Yankee fan, I don't know, something stupid, whatever it is, right? Or whatever it is, doesn't mean you can't work together to do good things. So the message we learned today, that even if somebody has said things, we shouldn't label them, because we said before, the neuroscience, a person can have in their mind different things, but they can have hatred in their head, but still do acts of compassion. And sometimes we're shocked. Oh, I thought this guy was a nice guy. How can he do such a terrible thing? Because people are capable of doing good things, and people are capable of doing horrible things. So, every time there's a crime, it's almost like it's scripted. The person always says, "Oh, he lived next door. He was the nicest guy, right?" Right? Or he was a nice guy, right? He said hello and everything else. I remember once watching a documentary. This girl whose father was a serial killer, and she said he was a great father. He was a great guy. He wasn't like a monster. We think monsters, so we think Jew haters are always Jew haters, and all whatever they're always saying, Heil Hitler, I'll Akbar, kill the Jews. No, that's not true. And just because a person has hatred inside, it doesn't mean they can't show compassion. And how do we do that? By interacting with them. So we have to prepare. It's true. You have to be ready. Israel has to have an army. Be ready for people that want to do harm and don't want to talk. But the first act should be, to engage with these people. Look what happened in the past year. Israel signed a pact with the UAE and with what's Saudi Arabia? They signed with Saudi Arabia. They normalized relations. They signed with Bahrain, right? Could you imagine? And let me tell you, you think everyone over there in UAE and Bahrain love the Jews? They love the Israelis? They don't. They just realize that there's a common interest. And I think we're okay with that. We don't need to go out to lunch, right?
Not everybody in Jordan likes the Israelis, but what I understand, you're able to, go and leave the country.
Right.
Checkpoints.
Yeah, exactly. So our job is to bring up the good in people. But ultimately, you have to know that the existence of the Jewish people is not a natural one. The existence of the Jewish people is a supernatural one. We've been here for 3,500 years. Remember, we spoke about in lesson 2, Jewish pride. The haters can hate all they want, and they can try as much as they want. We're here to stay. So our job is to put our faith in God. He will take care of everything. And then to create avenues in which to bring God's blessing. And when we people, you want to try to bring out their positive side. Only a person who's absolutely righteous has no negativity inside of him. Even if you're a good guy, a regular good guy, you have negativity inside of you. That's normal. It's okay. You're born that way. Our job is through interaction to bring out the positive. I think there's a lesson video. Yes.
Negative thoughts, actions, and speech create negative energy. Conversely, positive thoughts, actions, and speech create positive energy. And that's what led, with an idea that has its genesis in South Africa, to the idea of ARK, acts of random kindness. You see, this is kind of shaped a little bit, more or less, if you use your imagination, like Noah's Ark. And the idea is, you take some change, you place it in here, and when it's filled up, we pass it along to someone who's less fortunate. It isn't just the money collected, it's the thought and the feeling that it represents.
I went to a public school. I studied math. We studied how to solve math problems. I didn't know how to solve my own problems.
Rabbi David Aaron, a Jerusalem-based educator, reflects on his personal experience.
The real problems of life is what education should be focusing on. It's essentially about building people, and only great people will do great things.
It is my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Wilson Reagan. Mr. President.
On March 30th, 1981, then President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, delivered a luncheon address at the Washington Hilton.
Thank you very much.
He left the hotel at 2:27 p.m., but as he headed to his limousine, a would-be assassin opened fire. Reagan was critically wounded, and the nation collectively gasped in horror. The president survived, and at a public gathering 2 weeks later, the Lubavitcher Rebbe insisted that the instructive lesson of the assassination attempt must similarly survive. The Rebbe saw the event as a wake-up call for the nation to upgrade its approach to education.
Dort der Chok HaMedina medav gehen in a Beis Sefer. In der Beis Sefer meyusod und durchgenommen. A was darf geben a Beis Sefer darf geben Yidis. Nicht darf ausformen, aufton, aufmachen. Dem Jeser Leib Hodom, als soll sein mit Midis Tevis. und soll wissen, als stark, als geht und lernt in dem Beis Sefer. Aber der Riker lernen seine ist, was sie zum Ton Teva rumsieht. Und das ist der Teva Amiti für sich. Und das ist in ganzen Nitereien in der Tochnis und in der Programm von Beis Sefer.
As much as we want to graduate mathematicians and scientists, we also want to graduate decent human beings.
Dr. Rona Novick, Dean of the Azrieli Graduate School of Jewish Education and Administration, has given ample thought to this problem.
Very few educators would invite a charismatic speaker or have a big assembly program to create readers. They would understand that the way that we build reading skills is piece by piece and building block by building block. We start in kindergarten and first grade and we keep building on it. Well, we need to look at character education and social emotional learning in exactly the same way.
Judaism teaches us that it's important to give charity every day. And the more you give charity, that muscle of kindness within you gets stronger and stronger.
Rabbi Levi Greenberg and his wife Shana are emissaries of the Lubavitcher Rebbe in El Paso, Texas.
We embarked on a campaign to bring this message of daily giving to every single child in El Paso. And so we brought to El Paso the Ark Campaign. All the children in the school received one of these boxes, and they were told that the purpose of this box is to be taken home and filled every day. If they have extra coins, they should ask their parents for some money. After a month of collecting money, their class would nominate charities that should receive their combined money. And the winning charity would receive the combined monies that they had collected throughout that month. The ARC project, giving money every day, takes acts of random kindness and turns them into acts of routine kindness.
Raising a generation of individuals empowered with a sense of purpose and trained to pursue acts of kindness is an important factor in curing and preventing numerous social ills, including the reduction of hate and bigotry, along with anti-Semitism.
The more we give, the more we respect. We respect human life, we respect property, the more dignity we have for ourselves and for society. If we want to stop anti-Semitism, we have to stop hatred. And we have the opportunity to nip hatred in the bud by increasing in acts of goodness and kindness and inspiring and encouraging all of humanity to do so. Every single person should give charity every day, and hatred will be a thing of the past.
The call of the hour, more necessary than ever, is for each of us to adopt a charity box for regular, daily contributions, and to encourage all around us, family and friend, Jew and non-Jew, to act similarly. Actively demonstrate, encourage, and promote kindness, sympathy, and altruistic care. If a little illumination eliminates a lot of darkness, think of what a rapidly swelling force of systematic goodness can achieve for our communities, and ultimately for humanity. It's time to turn up the light.
So as we conclude the course, so it's one point. We're going to come to Mashiach, times of Mashiach, when Esau's kiss will be a genuine kiss. Everyone will work together. How do we do that? By believing in the good of people and having people do acts of kindness. So what we're going to do is, I know it's going to take a few minutes. Instead of just playing the key points of this last class, let's go through the key points from all 4 classes. So as kind of a synopsis of the past 4 weeks. We thank you so much for joining us. I know it's 2 more parts. We've run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be doing a very special course starting in February, and we hope you join us. The class will be uploaded, and we'll take any questions after the videos. 1 second.
Lesson 4. Lesson 1. The Eternal People. 1. Worrying creates dejection and ineptitude. To address an issue effectively, we need to reduce the anxiety associated with it. 2. The Jewish people are an eternal people. History has shown that despite the pain and suffering that we have endured, the Jews and Judaism always survive and thrive. Recognizing this is an important step toward feeling optimistic about our people and about our future. 3. To be realistic means to not lose sight of the fact that we are living in one of the best eras for Jews, and that we should be thankful for that. For the first time in millennia, the vast majority of Jews do not have a regime of persecutions. And in some countries, while individual acts of anti-Semitism has risen, the data also show that fewer people overall harbor anti-Semitic sentiments than previously. 4. The ultimate Jewish answer to anxiety is bitachon. We are empowered to ingrain in our minds a trusting attitude, feeling that God is going to take care of us and that He will be with us even when we pass through dark times. In fact, placing our trust in God triggers the opening of channels for additional revealed goodness. 5. The Torah teaches us that the success of any of our endeavors is God's providence and blessing. Nothing in our lives is a mere product of nature. God instructs us, however, to create a garment through which His blessings can operate in disguise. Hence, we must take all the natural steps, whether to earn a livelihood or to protect ourselves from anti-Semites. But the blessing is entirely God's doing. 6. Accordingly, our efforts to engage in the logical methods of protecting ourselves are inseparable from our efforts to secure God's protection. In the Purim story, Queen Esther recognized this, and she therefore prioritized being worthy of God's protection over being attractive to Achashverosh. Lesson 2. No apologies. 1. The absurd and contradictory claims of anti-Semites have persisted for millennia. Attempting to refute these conspiracy theories may keep some people away from anti-Semitism, but it has proven to be a futile endeavor against hardcore haters. 2. The term anti-Semitism sounds more like a theory and fails to convey that this phenomenon is actually evil wickedness. 3. Much has been said about the root cause of anti-Semitism. One approach sees it resulting from an inner void due to the lack of a true sense of purpose in life. The Jew represents a commitment to living for a higher purpose and dedication to the mission given to humanity by the world's creator. Anti-Semites wish to obliterate their inner emptiness that they are reminded of when encountering the Jew. 4. Hatred exists in the mind of the hater, not the hated. We must avoid internalizing anti-Semitism and imagining that changing elements of our Jewish heritage will solve anti-Semitism. 5. Jews and other minorities cannot be expected to be bifurcated people, severing themselves from their identities in the public sphere. For a minority to have rights in a given place means that it can have a public presence. Being open about our Jewish identity benefits Jews and other minorities. 6. For some potential haters, the best antidote against stumbling into anti-Semitic views is knowing Jews who are upright and of noble character, and noticing that this goodness is linked to their Jewish identity, upbringing, and way of life. To have this influence, we must be open about our Jewish identity. 7. A Jewish explanation for anti-Semitism must allow for the possibility of change. because the Jewish prophets insisted in God's name that anti-Semitism will eventually cease altogether. 8. We can reduce anti-Semitism by teaching the world to avoid an inner void, by embracing God's mission for all humanity. Lesson 3. The Promised Land. 1. Anti-Semitism seeks legitimacy from the most prestigious authority of any given era. At present, this authority is the pursuit of human rights. Consequently, many of today's anti-Semites focus overwhelmingly on Israel and accuse it of being the ultimate violator of human rights. 2. When Israel is A. demonized, or B. judged with a double standard, or C. when Israel's existence is delegitimized, the challenge exposes itself as an expression of anti-Semitism. 3. When anti-Semites refrain from asserting that they seek to annihilate Jewry, but merely take issue with specific Jewish beliefs or practices, claiming them to be barbaric, Jews can be tempted to join the fight against their fellow Jews, believing that they are saving Jews rather than hurting them. 4. There are several arguments for why Jews need and have a right to Israel. Most crucial is the Torah's oft-reiterated reminder that God gave Jews the land of Israel as an eternal inheritance. The deeper our appreciation of this reality, and the more we educate the next generation about its implications, the more support we will nourish toward the land of Israel. Such an approach can desirably influence the wider audience, but the most vital audience is our Jewish brothers and sisters. 5. To support Torah and God-based reasoning, it is necessary to create an environment that cherishes the Torah and nurtures faith. It is therefore critical to provide a robust Jewish education to ourselves and to the next generation. 6. Jews are a nation not because of our land, but because of our Torah. Nevertheless, the land is important to the Torah's vision for the world, inasmuch as it embodies the Jewish mission on earth, to infuse physicality with holiness. Lesson 4. Change of Heart. 1. The Torah's narrative of Jacob and Esau suggests that by employing the right words and deeds, we can influence those we deem to be against us. Accordingly, the 2nd century sage Rabbi Shimon bar Yocha'i traveled to Rome to win concessions for the benefit of the Jewish community, establishing a model followed by countless others, most famously the European court Jews of the early modern period. 2. Jews did not feel inferior while conducting diplomatic missions. They knew that the Jewish future depended on God, and that their job was to generate a garment behind which God could conceal his blessings. A firm belief that they were in God's hands inspired in them a sense of pride. 3. According to modern neuroscience, brains are built of multiple parts that weigh in concerning different choices, each part competing to control the single output channel of behavior. This explains why an individual with Jewish friends can nevertheless carry out a drunken tirade against Jews. Conversely, it explains why Jews can gain assistance from unlikely sources. 4. Today, we are finally able to campaign publicly against those who oppose us. However, it is often counterproductive to publicly brand individuals as enemies or anti-Semites. Slow to shame and quick to engage is still an effective route. 5. We must do everything possible to condition society to bring out the best in people rather than their more sinister elements. In the sphere of education, this means promoting an approach that is not restricted to acquiring information, but rather includes proper character traits, self-discipline, and the awareness that all humans are created to actively generate goodness in their environments. 6. Living in harmony with our fellow Jews enables us to better collaborate to ward off threats and promote our interests. Jewish mysticism teaches that God responds positively to Jewish unity, providing overt blessings of protection and goodness.
This is a promo for the next course. All right, that's the next course starting in February. And thank you so much for joining us. I thought it was very enlightening. It was very, very good. If you have any questions, always feel free to reach out and ask questions. The class will be uploaded to YouTube and sent out. We hope to see everybody for Hanukkah, the parade on Sunday. It's a COVID-friendly. All you got to be in your car. Then we're going to have menorah lighting. It's all outdoors on Sunday, November 28th. Then on Sunday, December 5th. We wish everyone a happy Hanukkah. Make sure you get your kids, you give your kids Hanukkah gelt. Sunday, December 5th in Pembroke Gardens. So we had the parade on the 28th, menorah lighting over here. Then so we had the 5th. Any questions before we go? Yes? No? Maybe? So? Everyone good? All right, Shabbos. Shabbos. See you guys Shabbos. All right?
Thank you, Rabbi.
All right, take care, Ellen. Feel better.
Thank you, Rabbi. Laila Tov.
Take care, guys. All right, Laila Tov. Did I end for everybody? How does it work? What do I do? And for